So we are almost done with this unit right now. There's one more quick thing I want to show you about Scratch before we move on to your homework assignment for this unit. And that is, what do you do if you want something other than the cat? I've been working with the cat the whole time here, and the cat is fine. I'm happy to use the cat, but maybe I want something different. For example, maybe instead of the cat rolling across the screen here, I want to have a baseball roll across the screen. How would I go about doing that? And so what I want you to notice is, remember we said that this area right here is where all of the sprites or the actors are stored that we want to have in our programs. And there's a little button right down here that allows me to choose additional sprites or different sprites. And you notice that when I hover on this icon, it says this is the choose a sprite option, right? And I get this little pop-up that says there's a couple of different ways in which I can choose a new sprite. The first is what I'm going to encourage you to use for now, but we're going to look at all of them for just a second. The first is the choose a sprite block. And so if I click on this, Scratch jumps over to a whole list of pre-built sprites. One of the things I love about Scratch is that there's a whole bunch of sprites just automatically built in. And you can do an awful lot with the built-in sprites. In fact, here is the baseball. Of course, I knew there was a baseball in here. But here is the baseball that I want to use. And so I can just click on that, and now I've added in a baseball sprite into my program. You see, I've got both the cat and the baseball, and they both have their own programs. I'm going to come back to this in a second. Let's just show you a couple more things about the choose a sprite. You notice that there are several hundred of them here, including a bunch of letters and numbers and things at the bottom. What I like about Scratch is that if you know you're looking for a particular kind of thing, I want some different people, I can just click on these menus up here and sort of change between different formats. And so here's Gobo. Remember we talked about Gobo in one of the intro videos? And there's these dancers. And you may have just noticed this a second ago. Turns out if you hover over one of the sprites, it will circle through all of the costumes that it has. And so let me come back to here. When I go to Animals and Scratchy Cat, you see Scratchy Cat only has these two sprites. When I go to Sports and I hover over basketball, nothing happens. Baseball. That's because these actually only have one costume. Batter has a couple. Beach Ball only has one. Ben has a couple. And so there's just a whole lot of different things that you can use here. And so you can search, you can kind of select down to a particular area, and you can find whatever it is that you might want. But suppose that it doesn't have what you want. Well, there's options that we can do. Another one that we can do is that we can choose to paint a sprite from scratch. So if I click on this, what I get is a brand new sprite, but I get a paint area here where I can come in and say, well, what I really wanted is a happy face. So let me see. I want a circle. I want the circle to be yellow when I get started here. So I'm going to create this circle of the face. Let's see. Now I'm going to add a paintbrush, and I'm going to go to black. And so I might come back here to black, and I might give my little smiley face some eyes and a mouth, and perfect. Now I've got this thing out here, and I can add some code to my smiley face sprite that I just drew. I also can do the third option up here is surprise. What surprise simply does is just randomly gives me something from the menu of options. Rooster looks a little bit like Hey Hey from Moana. And finally, there's the ability to upload. So suppose you wanted to have a sprite that was you, or your school mascot, or Bart Simpson. I don't know if that's appropriate or not, but suppose you wanted to have these kinds of things. You can go to upload a sprite, and now what it does is it opens up your menu system, and it allows you to go through and look at different things. And so I might grab my daughter here, and I might import her. It takes a little bit because that turned out to be a pretty big picture. And now I've imported that. That's too big. I don't want all of that. So I'm going to come in, I'm going to edit her costume. I'm going to go into the eraser mode, and I'm going to come in and edit this out, and I can trim down, and I could get only her face, and I'm not going to take the time to do this all right now, but you could see that by erasing all of this, I could come up with just her face in the end as a sprite, and I could use my daughter as one of my costumes. And so that's the options for Sprite. Using one of the canned sprites, right? Using one of the canned sprites, using something you painted by hand, or using an image that you upload and maybe adjust in your program. All right, I only want the baseball for this. So now that I've shown you all this, I'm going to actually come in and I'm going to delete all these others. And the way that I do that is just to kind of hover over here and say, I don't want the rooster, I don't want my daughter. I want the baseball, but I'm going to do one quick thing before I delete Scratchy Cat. I want the baseball to have exactly the same program that Scratchy Cat did. I want the baseball to start on the left edge of the screen and roll across to the right edge of the screen. And so all this code is what I want. I don't want to have to reproduce that in the baseball. If I throw away Scratchy Cat right now, his code goes away and I have to reproduce it all in the baseball. But let me show you a really great little feature here. If you have some code in a sprite that works, but you want it to go to another sprite, all I have to do is grab this, and instead of moving it around, I'm going to drag all the way over here, and notice when I get close enough that baseball kind of wiggled, it says, yep, I know that's what you want, and if I drop it, it doesn't look like much happened. It came back over here and it's still in the sprite, but now when I go back to the baseball sprite, boom, there it is. And so I can now delete Scratchy Cat. I only have the baseball sprite in my program, and voila, the baseball rolls across the stage. Exactly the way Scratchy Cat did, but I can now have it work with the baseball.